It's time for the Splatoon 2 review for the Nintendo Switch. This is the first Switch game I'm reviewing. I got the Switch day one at midnight at my local Walmart, and I'm glad I had a reservation because I still cannot find any in stores. But about the game, Splatoon 2 is the sequel to the original Splatoon on the Wii U. If you already own the original game and are considering getting this, you might want to take a second to rethink it, and I'll explain why in the review. The game is highly similar to its predecessor. There are a handful of online modes for you to enjoy, but there's also a simpler single-player mode. When I say simple, I don't mean a pushover. You play as an Inkling, a human-squid hybrid. In human form, you're able to use your weapon to soak the area in ink, as well as shoot enemies and objects with it. In squid form, you're able to swim through your own colored ink much faster than if you were to run through it. You can also climb walls and jump greater distances while in this form. Single-player mode has you traveling from point A to point B, all while spotting your enemies with your ink and solving puzzles. The goal of this mode is to retrieve all the Zapfish in the area. A Zapfish is yours to collect at the end of each level, and once you've completed every level within the area, the boss fight will be accessible. Once you defeat it, the final Zapfish is yours, and you will be able to advance to the next area. The game will test your skills as you progress through each level. You don't have to play single-player mode, however I highly recommend it, as it doubles as a pseudo-tutorial for many scenarios. It forces you to learn how to play with different weapons, something you'll most likely need to know if you want to become great at this game, even if you only plan on using a few weapons most of the time, because knowing how to use them effectively can help train your mind on how to defend against them as well. Multiplayer returns with just a few new additions. Like in the original, you start at level 1 and are forced to play Turf Wars. In this mode, you need to ink more area in your team's color than your opponent's. It's an easy concept, but execution isn't always this way. For one, many times you'll be teamed up against players who have access to better equipment, which gives them an advantage, such as more defense, faster movement, and various other passive abilities which can hinder your team's success. When you complete a match, regardless if you win or lose, you'll gain experience towards your next level. You will of course gain more XP if you win, but even if you lose, you'll still gain a little to help you reach the next level. Increasing your level will allow you to access more equipment, such as headgear, shirts, and shoes. All equipment has at least one passive ability, but most have slots for additional abilities. To unlock them, you need to win, or lose, but preferably win online matches. There are new abilities in this game that the original Splatoon doesn't have, and some abilities have been removed, or rather replaced, such as the Bubbler. Instead of an instant 360-degree shield that gave you complete invincibility for a few seconds, you now have Ink Armor, which takes a second to fully activate, and will protect you and your teammates for a few seconds, but it will break away if you're shot too many times with it. I must begrudgingly admit this was a smart move, because let's face it, the Bubbler was way OP, especially on tower control. So they essentially toned it down, which is bittersweet, but in the grand scheme of things, I think this was the right move. It's best to keep purchasing new equipment with multiple locked abilities, because you never know what you're going to get once they're unlocked. I like to play stealthier and sneak up on opponents, but more often than not, I have to bull rush them, so I like playing with defensive upgrades as well. There is a feature in the game that allows you to choose which abilities you'd like to receive, but it's not always a guarantee, so make sure you stock up on equipment so you can find out which abilities work best with your playstyle. In addition to new abilities, a handful of new weapons have been added to your arsenal, one of which is the Splat Dualies. There's a few new sub-weapons as well, like the curling bombs. Adding new weapons is great for new strategies, and they're just overall fun to use. Once you reach level 10, you now have access to ranked battles. Here, you'll play one of 3 game modes, depending on which one is open at the time. There are Splat Zones, which is my favorite of the 3. Here, you must control a certain area in your team's ink color and prevent your opponents from doing just that until time runs out, or at least have had more control if the match runs into overtime. The second game mode, Rainmaker, has you and your teammates trying to carry the Rainmaker, an ink cannon more or less, to your opponent's base. This is a very strategic heavy mode, and you really need to know the maps and be comfortable with your gear and weapons if you want to be a good teammate, especially if you can't communicate well with them. The last mode is Tower Control. You need to cover a movable tower in your team's ink color and ride it over to your opponent's base. I can't decide if Rainmaker or Tower Control is more strategic heavy, but like Rainmaker, you will need to be familiar with the maps, your equipment, and weapons if you want to succeed. Once you complete a match in any of the ranked battles, if you won, you'll fill up a rank gauge which starts at C-, and you'll also gain XP towards your overall level, as well as XP towards any locked passive abilities on your equipment. If you lose, however, you'll get Jack Squat! Well, you'll still gain a bit of XP towards your overall level and unlocked gear, but as far as your rank goes, you'll get nothing! Even though Turf Wars isn't as fun as any of the 3 ranked battles, it's more consistent in leveling up, and a good way to become more confident with the maps and your skills. There's a new mode called Salmon Run. Here, you'll join 3 other people in a co-op match fighting off waves of various enemies. The objective is to gather as many golden eggs as you can within a time limit, and the more eggs you gather, the closer you get to obtaining valuable prizes. This is one of the best features of Splatoon 2, however it comes with a huge drawback. It's only available during certain times. Like, why? Even if there's a legit reason, it still sucks that this isn't accessible 24/7. The graphics seem fresher this time around. It looks similar to the first game, but there's more animations for the characters, lots of reflections, some models have more detail and textures, and overall it just looks more polished. Plus, I like how they gave the ink a glitter look in single player mode. Sparkly! The controls are almost the same as Splatoon 1. The only real difference I found was that jumping is now done by pressing B instead of X. It takes some getting used to, especially when you've played Breath of the Wild for so long. Like right here, I try to jump, but by hitting X I bring up the map, and then I start to panic, and then I launch myself to a teammate and... how did I survive that? Anyway, if you play using the Pro Controller, I think you'll enjoy the game more. I played Splatoon 1 with the gamepad, which wasn't bad, but playing with the Joy-Con definitely isn't my preferred method, whether it's playing on the tablet itself, with the comfort grip, or just by themselves. While playing, you can rotate and tilt the controller in any direction to move the camera. You can also use the right analog stick to move the camera left and right, but you can't tilt it unless you turn off motion controls, so the game gives you options for your playstyle, but I prefer to keep the motion controls on. This is the first game to use Nintendo's Switch app for iPhone and Android devices. My brother and I tested this out, but we quickly realized it's not meant for just 2 people. You can use the app to speak with your teammates in-game, which is a very nice addition, something Splatoon 1 needed, but it's very situational. You need to have at least one person connected to it who's on your team to really get some value out of it. The main problem I had with it is that you cannot use it while playing co-op multiplayer in online mode when you're teamed up with random people. At the very least, I was hoping my brother and I could talk to each other with the app while we were paired up with 2 other random people, but this isn't the case. Well, perhaps it's unnecessary, since if it's just the 2 of us, we can just call each other with the actual phone function of our phones. Still, it would have been nice to be able to speak with everyone on your team, but the only way to do that via the app is if everyone on your team is connected to it. I also didn't like that when you were playing with a friend in a random match, you weren't guaranteed to be on their team every time. I really wish there were more stages than what's currently available. I enjoy the new stages, and I appreciate that the set of levels in any online mode changes every 2 hours instead of Splatoon 1's 4 hours, but still, there aren't enough. However, free DLC should help with this. In all honesty, I like the music in Splatoon 1 better. It's not bad in this game, but the original soundtrack was catchier, and I wish they had kept it. At the time of this review, I don't have any compatible amiibo for this game, so I can't test it out, but I've heard you can use the amiibo to save your weapons, equipment, outfits, and control settings. So, with everything said, is Splatoon 2 worth buying if you already own Splatoon 1? Well, it depends. If you're more of a casual player, I don't think I'd recommend it until it gets a price drop. At its core, it's the same game. However, if you're a more serious player, you'll appreciate the new weapons and stages to test your skills. Just remember, don't expect a huge change. Not saying that's a bad thing, just understand, that's how it is. If you haven't played the original and are interested in getting into Splatoon, then I think this would be a better start. Just good luck on finding a Switch. This game gets a 4.25 out of 5 with the title of Awesome.